Hello.
Hello AOS fans!
It's the Agents of Embergard.
And in this video we're looking at the Wrack and Ruin Rivals deck.
Wrack and Ruin, one of the first two new Rivals decks that GW have brought out for Embergard.
Very exciting times. So in this video we're going to give a quick overview of how it works as a Rivals deck on a standalone, and then Pete's going to show us what a couple of the choice cards are, and then finally we'll talk about what it pairs with well if you're thinking of bringing it to the Nemesis world.
So the deck itself is all about ping and random stuff like that. There are, I think, 6 or 7 different types of ping cards in here.
I can see that totally getting lots of play, because there's one thing an Underworlds player likes, it's ping.
Ping-a-ling. So some of them are very scenario-centric. So you have to make sure that you've got a fighter on an edge hex, or you've got people in certain situations. So some of them aren't the best ping damage cards all the time, but there's still enough in there to really give you lots of options.
I think I have to say super powerful ping cards are so 2018.
Yeah, and a lot of them, the ones that are just straight ping damage, generally you can't pick a vulnerable fighter, so it's nice that they've done that in a lot of situations, and a lot of them will also mean that your opponent gets the choice. So a bit like the Discord, where it's like, oh, you can either pick 2 fighters and they both get staggered, or you can pick a fighter and they take a wound. So it's not just keep ping damage on people, so it's a nice variety in there.
Oh, I like to hear.
So I've gone through the deck and I've picked out what I think are some of the better cards. Now some of them are really good depending on the situation, but these ones are all ones that I think are just generally quite handy across the board.
So what are the objectives then, Pete?
So the objectives I've picked out, and I've tried to keep them towards the more generic end rather than ones that are good for elites or good for swarms. The first one is Living on the Edge. And this card you score in an end phase if a vulnerable friendly fighter is in enemy territory.
Okay. And
that's 2 glory. All you've got to do is have a vulnerable fighter just over in your opponent's half somewhere.
You see, I'm not a big fan of vulnerable fighter cards.
No, I see what you mean, but if you've got a fighter that's vulnerable, that's already been brought back, especially for those warbands that can bring fighters back and they're not worth any more glory.
That's true, actually, yeah, it would be good for those ones.
Yeah, there are situations, I think, where you could use that, and there are other cards in there that help you turn, get fighters more vulnerable, so it could be useful, and it's 2 glory, which is quite a decent score.
I could definitely see that fitting into a Sepulchral Guard, control-y type deck.
Exactly. Yeah. The next card I've got is Ploy Master, which you score in an end phase. It's not Surge, though. You just score in an end phase if you've played 3 or more ploys in that battle round.
Yeah, it's an old one, but a good one.
Exactly. It's an end phase now rather than a surge, but it's still a pretty easy one to score, I think.
Yeah.
And the next one is Predictable End. You score this immediately after an ability on a friendly Wrack and Ruin card inflicts damage on an enemy fighter holding a treasure token.
Okay, yeah, that's a good card. I can see that happening, especially as you said there were like 6 or 7 ping cards, and people are going to be on treasure tokens because it seems they're more important in this game, and I think there's going to be a lot of flexing into treasure tokens, so yeah, I can see that being good.
Exactly, so that one I think is going to be a hard to stop surge. The next one we've got is Low on Options. You score immediately after you discard a power card if 5 or more ploy cards are in your power discard pile. It's not a round 1 card, but round 2 onwards, when you've already got a load of cards in your discard pile.
Especially with focus.
Yes, exactly. So I think you can very easily score that round 2 on, and there's not a lot your opponent can do to stop you with that one. And the last one I've got, which I know you're a little bit of a favourite for, is Alone in the Dark.
Oh, I do love Alone in the Dark.
This has got some of the best art on I've seen.
Are you sure about
cards.
that? Because I've heard that the art isn't very good in this.
Oh, no, I see. I think photographs do count as art.
Okay, fair
enough.
So
there's whole competitions around it from what I understand.
Okay.
And I think that's got some of the best imagery on it so far. And again, it's Alone in the Dark. It's 2 glory, just don't have anybody next to each other. It can be a bit of a pain in the arse sometimes.
It's not good in the Goblin Mirror match.
No, but late in the game when there's not many fighters left and people are trying to stay away from each other quite often, I think that's 2 easy glory.
If you've got a 3-fighter warband, you love that card.
That is a fantastic
If you come up
card.
against one, rather, or if you're playing them. If you come up against one, you're like, ha ha ha, because probably my fighters are going to die, so they're not going to be next to you, and I'm going to score 2 glory.
Exactly. Moving on to the power cards, the first one is a classic. It's Confusion.
And what's confusing about it?
I don't know.
Yep, it's a classic, switches 2 fighters around. What I really like in this version, you could have a situation where you're on an objective, your opponent comes steaming in, pushes you back, overruns onto the objective, and then you switch it round.
Portal all day long.
Which is, I do rather like, because it gives it an extra utility that it didn't have in the old game.
The next one is one of the ping cards, or potential ping cards, because it's damned if you do. But it's kind of like the Thricefold Discord, you've got to make a choice situations.
Okay.
Your opponent must pick one of the following for you to resolve. So they either pick an enemy fighter and you can push that fighter 1 hex, or they pick an enemy fighter that's not vulnerable and inflict 1 damage on that fighter. So you'd have to pick Can I push someone or can I damage someone? And then I can pick the person to push or damage. You are literally damned if you do and damned if you don't with that one.
Does that count as a ping card? Because I can think of very few situations where the person would pick, oh, you can damage me.
If you know that they're going for supremacy and stuff like that,
maybe.
I definitely could see that being useful. If it's near the end of a round and your opponent seems to be loading up on objectives, and you can be like, yeah, it's a tricky one. The next one is another ping card, which is Ominous Rumbling.
Oh yeah, it's not just your tummy.
No. Again, your opponent must pick one of the following abilities for you to resolve. They either pick 2 enemy fighters and give each of them a stagger token. That can be quite nasty if you're looking to club people about. Or again, they pick a fighter that's not vulnerable and you inflict a damage on them.
Okay, so more ping. Yeah.
More ping, or making them vulnerable to make them easy to punch in the face. Yeah. And the next one's Vicious Intent. Now this is a fantastic one. Plays immediately after you pick a melee weapon as part of an attack, and you basically get +1 dice for that attack, or +2 dice if the fighter is undamaged. So if the target's undamaged, you get 2 dice. Okay, that's quite 2 dice on your attack card. That's a nice card.
That is a nice card.
And the last one I picked is Fireproof, which is the first time damage is inflicted on a friendly fighter in the next turn, reduce the damage by 1. A generic.
Those cards are always good. The only problem with that card is you have to blow it before the round, so it's not like one where you can play it and go, actually, I'm going to take 1 less damage. You have to put it down.
Yes.
And the opponent can then go, actually, I'm not going to attack.
But anything that's going to make your opponent go, I'm not going to attack you, is also good.
It's always good. Yeah.
It's another attack that's been negated that turn. And I've got 3 upgrades, which I think are like the best ones. The others have certain scenarios where they're useful, but these ones I think 3 that I pretty much always take. And the first one's a pretty generic one, but it's great speed. +1 move for 0 extra glory to spend. I mean, it's a great card. Yeah,
you do need to have a little spread of upgrade values now.
I do think so,
if you load too many 2-value glory cards, it can be difficult to actually utilise them.
Absolutely. And the next one I've got is a Rock Splitting Tread, and it gives you a stomp reaction. Immediately after your last action step in a battle round, you can pick an adjacent enemy fighter that is not vulnerable and inflict 1 damage on them.
Okay,
you then roll a dice, and on a hammer you discard the card. So you've got a 2/3 chance of keeping it for later rounds to stomp on more people. That is, I think, pretty nice to get a little bit extra ping in there. Obviously you can't pick vulnerable people again, but you can still ping more damage around all over the place. And the last card is Desperate Defense. Whilst this fighter is the target of an attack, the attacker's weapons have -1 damage, and the next time damage is inflicted as part of an attack, you can discard this card afterwards. So it's a pretty generic -1 damage card. It is 2 glory though.
Right.
But as with all rival decks, some cards are great and some cards aren't so great. And I've got some aren't so great cards in here. So
these ones are less equal than the others.
Yes, definitely. So the first, which I love the artwork on, is Out of the Frying Pan. It's 2 glory. It's got fantastic artwork, but you score this in end phase if 3 or more damaged friendly fighters have move and or charge tokens in enemy territory.
Oh no.
Again, your opponent's unlikely to spread damage around, and you generally don't ever want to be in a position where you've got 3 or more enemy fighters all damaged and all in your opponent's territory with charge counters. It's 2 glory, but it's just not worth it. And the last one is Careful Advance. You score this in immediately after a friendly fighter moves if 2 or more friendly fighters have move tokens or in enemy territory.
Yeah, I hate that card.
It's 1 glory. It's a surge, but unless you're playing Sepulchral Guard or maybe Gits, you're just never going to...
There is a version of that in the main box. And I played it with the Embergard. It's like, oh, brilliant. What I really want to do is just walk into enemy territory.
I hope no one attacks me today. So those are some less than optimal objectives, and then we're on to the power cards. This one, Deadly Traps. Now this is a ping damage card, and you place immediately after a friendly fighter's draw on attack. If the target is not vulnerable and was driven back, you can inflict 1 damage on them. So you've got to fail the attack, but you've still got to be able to push them back, and then you can do a damage to them.
Right.
That seems very specific and not something I'd want to keep hold of a card for.
No. No, one of those ones is just desperate to use it. It's still in your hand, then you get to the end of the round, like, do I keep it? Do I keep it? Like,
and you'll get rid of it, and the first thing you're going to do the next round is draw and push your opponent back.
Of course, it is a ping.
It is a ping, but the fighter cannot be vulnerable. So again, it's one of the situations like, if you just wanted to kill that 1 wounded fighter, you still can't even use it then as well. No. So doubly annoying. And the other one I've got is Flee. Pick a friendly fighter in friendly territory. That fighter has +3 move in your next activation step if that fighter's move in that action step, that move cannot end in friendly territory. So you've got to basically sprint across the board.
Which is the opposite of fleeing.
I know. One thing that annoys me is that it's not fleeing, it's charge, not flee. But also, I'm not sure if a +3 move is ever going to be that useful just for 1 turn.
No, and it would work with the charge action, wouldn't it? Because that's a move.
Yeah, it could be possibly good with the charge, but overall, I think there are better cards to have, and that one seems very blah to me.
Blah.
And then we come on to the upgrades. The first one is Misfortune. It's 0 glory. which is generally good for an upgrade, and it gives you a surge ability called Ill-Fated. And immediately after this fighter uses a core ability, you can inflict 1 damage on this fighter. You can then remove this upgrade from this fighter and equip it to another friendly fighter. Why would I ever want to injure my own fighters?
I remember reading that when the pack first arrived, and I just don't understand what it's for.
Now there is the upgrade, there is the objective where if you have vulnerable fighter in enemy half.
Yeah.
So if you've got a fighter with 2 wounds left and you've got that on him, you can run into your enemy half, do a wound to him, make him vulnerable. It's like, why would I want to?
yeah.
So that one, not a great card for me. I'm not enjoying it. The next one is Unstoppable. I like the artwork on it because it's got one of the Nurgle boys on it, and it kind of ties in with their theme a bit, but the card is, whilst this fighter is vulnerable, each time 1 damage is inflicted on this fighter, reduce that damage to 0. And it's 2 glory. 2 glory to stop ping damage attacks. I'm not feeling it. I just don't think it's going to be that useful because your opponent's going to go, oh, I'll just hit you with a 2 damage attack then.
It would be useful if there were more cards like the Rhineworm's Bite had a card like that, but you often were doing damage onto yourself, and then you wouldn't take it in those circumstances. But there doesn't seem to be enough other cards to do damage to both sides.
There are a few, but generally your opponent picks the fighter. So they're just not going to pick the fighter with that upgrade. Why would you do that? So that one for me, I could see what they were trying to go for with the theme of ping damage and making them immune to it, but it doesn't really work. And the last one is a fantastic card. It's called Barge. You might have heard of it. Gives you a core ability where you can then, as a core ability, who has no move or charge tokens, you can move them, and that move must end adjacent to an enemy fighter. You give that fighter a charge counter, and then you pick an enemy fighter adjacent to them, and you push them 1 hex and give them a stagger counter.
Okay, how many glory is it?
That's 2.
So that's 2 glory to give somebody an action that you never used to use in the old game.
Exactly. And that's why
I can see why you didn't
it's in my pile of poo.
Your pile of poo.
There's about a third of each I've selected for great ones and poor ones. To be honest, the rest of them could have probably gone into the really nice pile because there's lots of ping damage, there's lots of other funky things, there's cards to give you cleave, there's various other stuff in there. But overall, I think this is going to be a great little deck to take and to pair with other, I think, more offensive decks, because you're already going to be charging in and doing a lot of damage. So all those extra ping damages are really going to help you in that situation.
It pair nicely with a nice county. It would pair nicely with a defensive deck.
Yeah.
But actually, I suppose it's quite flexible because it could also be useful with some bit of objective holding as well, potentially.
There's a few damage reduction cards in there, so yes, and wanting to stand on objectives and then just being able to ping people, you might reduce some of your ability to ping damage, because if you're standing on a load of objectives, you wouldn't want to take that card, which is damage an enemy fighter on an objective and those kind of things. But
although, I think, of course, the first thing they're going to do is jump on an objective to stop you holding an objective.
This is true, so maybe you can double bluff them. So there you go. I think this deck will go well with all sorts of warbands. There's stuff in here to help with the Horde warbands, with the Elite warbands, because a lot of it's ping. You don't have to rely on heavy hitters or, you know, just dangle bros or anything like that. I think there's a lot of flexibility here, and that's probably why it's a mastery deck.
So that's Pete's overview of the deck. If you want to know anything else about it, do write in the comments below. Let us know and we'll try and get back to you.
Yeah, what warbands or other decks are you looking forward to pairing with the Whack and Woo in?
So if you want to hear more lovely Underworlds content from us, don't forget to click that like button.
And click that subscribe button.
And ring the bell so you get notifications of all future videos.
So we'll see you soon, maybe in the Embergard.
Bye!